Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We are in the never-ending Billy Meyer case with all the tremendous information that's available there. There is an article on the Future of Mankind site that I've been referring to in the past couple of shows. It's called Attacking Questions from Japan. And it's only pages 16 to 20 of 30 total pages that Billy wrote. And it's about the history of the Oriental races and how they originated from off the planet, as did many of the other races here on the Earth. So this is just one of the pieces in the unfolding story of our history here, as far as the origins of the Earth people goes. And I've finally gotten this down to a reasonable summary, and I apologize if I've not been easy to follow. In some cases, this story isn't so easy to follow, and the history of humanity on the Earth is not so easy to follow. So we have to go back 16 million years ago to get the true start of this story. 16 million years ago, an expedition fleet from the Lyra Systems left their home system and traveled to the other side of our galaxy, the Milky Way Galaxy. And there's a center sun in the Milky Way Galaxy, and they traveled to the far other side of our galaxy to the planet called Kudra. And the Kudra is the home of what is called the Kinten and the Niper races, which are the Oriental peoples. So these research ships from the Lyra system, they brought 4,000 people back to an area in the Lyra system called the Lasan Alliance. There must have been a lot of planets that supported life in the Lyrian system. So they brought these 4,000 Oriental people back, and these people populated 5 planets in this Lasan Alliance of planets. So millions of years passed, and the people there in this Lasan Alliance of planets in the Lyrian system, they fought wars, and eventually these people left. You know, by this time there were millions of them, I'm sure, maybe billions, but 38,000 of them traveled in 9 spacecraft to the planet Earth. And they settled on Earth about 6.7 million years ago in the northeast corner of a large landmass that appeared, and at that time we had a global ocean which covered the entire Earth. Again, this was about 6 to 7 million years ago. And these people that were originally, their original origin was the planet Kudra, but they came from the Lyrian system. About 6 to 7 million years ago. But there was a problem. The atmosphere of the Earth caused their ships to deteriorate, to corrode, and eventually these people perished, and their spirit forms went into the spirit realm here on the Earth, and they became part of the reincarnational cycles on Earth. Now, I don't know when those reincarnational cycles picked back up, and when they were ever born again, but their spirit forms were here on the Earth at that point. Okay, during this time, the people back on Kudra, which is the original home of these Oriental races, they were living a very degenerate life that led to a massively huge population explosion. So billions of people left their world, Kudra, in millions of spacecraft, and they traveled through space for an extremely long period of time, trying to look for a new home. They became lost, and billions of these people died on their ships because of diseases. So, you know, from Hollywood, we have a somewhat of a romantic idea of what space travel is. Well, sometimes it's not so romantic. It's actually extremely dangerous. And in this case, billions of people died, and there were only 418,000 people left. And they actually traveled back to the Lyra system. But they settled on a planet called Nissan. And that was about 2.4 million years ago. So, about 26,000 years ago, more people came from Kudra, and they settled on Earth in the areas of Japan and China. And of course, these people have lost their history and their technologies, as is the case with many other of the people that live on the Earth now. So anyway, that's a summary, fairly clear. There's a lot of details there. You might have to go back over some of those details to get all of the clear picture in your own mind. I've done many shows on one of the first civilizations to come here was led by a man named Pelagon, who was a king of wisdom and Ishwish, a ruler who left, I actually think he left the Plejaren system and came to the Earth. That was about 150,000 years ago. And they lived, he brought about 70,000 people with him, I believe. They settled on the Earth, and they lived in peace for, thousands of years until Pelagon died. And the king of wisdom that took over for Pelagon wasn't so benevolent, and eventually led to wars. And there was a great world war that wiped out many, many people on the Earth. Some people left, and they fled to other star systems, particularly Beta Centauri. And then other peoples that stayed here eked out a miserable existence. And the people that lived here they had really been sent back nearly to the Stone Age, to the harshest forms of living. And then about 133,000 years ago, the people that eventually formed the cities of Atlantis and Lemuria came back to the Earth. And they developed a great city in Atlantis, which was a landmass that existed, I believe at that time, between South America and Africa, somewhere in that vicinity in the Mid-Atlantic. Atlant was the ruler, his wife Kariatide, and they built a beautiful city on this landmass which existed somewhere there in the Atlantic Ocean there. Also, I believe it was Muras who came here. He was another Ishwish, came here, built the city of Mu in the area that is now the Gobi Desert. And there were two underground cities there, Garth Alpha and Garth Beta, that they also built that were connected by underground tunnels. These two cities were destroyed in a great war, and the great war ended with the Lemurians bringing back a fragment of the planet Melona and slamming that into Atlantis, and it causes a global devastation. Now, I think that occurred about 11,500 years ago. That was the great pole shift that occurred where the area that we called Hyperborea at that time was up in the north. It was a very warm climate, believe it or not, around our North Pole. There was some fundamental difference in the Earth's atmosphere, and we had what you might call a firmament at that time, which was kind of a cloud covering, which kept in a lot of the warmth. So our climate was fundamentally different, and we could have areas like Hyperborea in the north, which were extremely warm all year round. It was like an eternal summer. In any case, when the asteroid impacted, when that weapon that the people of Mu brought back to the Earth, and they steered it with kind of electromagnetic energy from certain engines and atomic engines, and they eventually knocked the Earth off its axis. And we had the Great Pole Shift, and the area which was in the North Pole area, the Hyperborea area, which the Nazis were talking about and looking for, that area shifted down to where Florida is now. So our Florida is still a wonderful climate, but at one time it was up near our northern pole. So anyway, and about 11,500 years ago, as best as I can sort out, and I continue to research this, is when we started our current age, our current civilization. Now, the Great Pyramid of Giza, they're actually someday going to determine that that's 73,000 years old. That was built before the last group of Japanese people got here. That was built around 73,000 years ago. And a lot of these ancient megalithic and monolithic structures go back to these civilizations in our ancient past. So just to put things in perspective, 16 million years ago is when I started this little story out, when the expedition fleet left the Lyra Systems to discover the yellow races on the planet Kudra. There were no naturally evolving Homo sapiens on the planet Earth until about 9 to 12 million years ago. So these people had very advanced space travel, some 8 million years before there were any true Homo sapiens on the planet Earth. So try to put that in perspective. Another thing to put into perspective, if you can, is that our planet Earth is fairly old in terms of planets in the Milky Way Galaxy. We're out on a very remote spiral arm. Our planet's about 5 billion years old. Now, the spirit form of Edward Albert Meyer is very ancient. And we would use the German the German prefix signifying the earliest, most ancient, initial, primeval, when we refer to his spirit form, because it's 9.6 billion years old. A spirit form being the Geist form in the German. So the information that Edward Albert Meyer brings to the Earth is partly from extraterrestrials, partly from his predecessor personalities, what's stored in his subconscious, and partially from what comes from the universal storage banks. There are impulses that come from the storage banks, and the impulsation is Regung in the German. An impulsation or an impulsation, meaning that something goes in and something develops. We think of that kind of like a signal. That's probably about the best way that I can describe that. In these signals, which is probably not the best translation, but it makes it easier for me to understand. These signals come from the universal storage banks. Now, there is a certain kind of storage bank called a Speicherbank in the German, and that's a spiritual storage bank. And if you go out to the Figu site, you can probably get a good translation of Speicherbank as well. So in any case, Billy at a very young age was receiving these impulsations or these signals from the universal storage banks and the planetary storage banks. Much of the book, The Goblet of Truth, came from the planetary storage banks. Other information comes from the universal storage banks. I wanted to pick up in the book, The Psyche, from something that I started to talk about last week. And The Psyche is a very interesting book, and you can probably order this if Michael Horn has any left. Many of the books that I have gotten have come from Michael Horn, who sometimes will sell the books that Billy writes kind of off his website, theyfly.com. You should probably, and I don't, and I need to, start ordering them from the Figu sites, which is kind of a complicated thing, which I've never actually done yet. But you can get them off of the various Figu sites. Figu is the organization from Switzerland and from Canada and from the U.S. Well, there's really no official Figu from the U.S. right now. But there are groups of people all over the world that are disseminating the information that I bring to you on a weekly basis. And one of these books is called The Psyche. And particularly the first, I guess you'd call it the first chapter or so of this book. The first 35 pages, I think I've read a dozen times to try to really wrap my mind around it. But what I'm reading to you now, or what I'm going to tell you about now, comes from page 106 in my edition, and it talks about the god of the hunt, who today we call the devil, who originally was called Tubal, and then Tibal, and then eventually, over many, many years, the word devil arose out of that. Now, the Meyer information says this person, and I say person, I'm not saying a demon, I'm not saying a fallen angel, I'm saying this person was an extraordinary person who had immense spiritual and consciousness-related powers. Now, was he an extraterrestrial? I do not know. It doesn't say here. But ancient information says that the original Tubal had two horn-like structures that grew out of his skull. And he was the so-called Superman of the hunt that would use these consciousness-based powers to help these ancient people, particularly the Celtic peoples, during the time of various hunts. So, now where did the idea of God come from? And if you've listened to this show before, we talk about the creation, the universal consciousness. But the term God that our religious organizations use is really kind of a combination, in my opinion, of the notion of these ancient supermen and the creation, the universal consciousness. So things kind of got mixed up there in our religions. Let's hear what it says here in the book Psyche. If there was a God, as the religions see and name him, then there would be only one single religion in the whole world, the religion of God. But that's not the case. Now, the creation, the universal consciousness, as it's described in the Meyer information, they call it the Wesenheiten, which means it functions kind of automatically. It is really neither good or evil. It's kind of towards the good a bit. It's neutral positive. It's a pure spiritual energy. It really doesn't demand anything from humanity. It never becomes angry or jealous. It creates spirit forms, Geist forms, as a part of its own evolution. So after you live out your life, you're not going to die and then go and disappear into another world and rot there until a judgment day. That would make no sense. What's going to happen is your spirit form And your consciousness, your material consciousness, it's called the consciousness block, will come out of your body and go in the spiritual realm. The consciousness block goes into the overall consciousness block, where the information is processed from your previous life. And what is of an evolutive value will then be used to strengthen your spirit form. And that's how you evolve. So what your spirit form has learned is processed in the afterlife. It's used to strengthen your spirit form, and your memories of your predecessor personality go into the subconscious of the new consciousness block that is created. So before you reincarnate, you'll get a new consciousness. But the new consciousness has the memories of the predecessor personalities locked in its subconscious. A little complicated, but not so much. So that's the way it works. That's the way reincarnation works. So you'll come back in, the spirit form comes back into the body of a child at 21 days, and the new mentality, the new material consciousness, has to develop and evolve and grow back up and learn many, many things. Now, but its overall evolutionary level is where it left off at the last lifetime. And you will get impulses from the storage banks as well as inspiration from your previous personality as you go through these many, many, many lifetimes. And we live through 5 evolutionary steps in a physical body. And the psyche, the book here, the psyche says that we live for 42 million years. We reincarnate for 42 million years in a pure physical body. Anyway, there was a couple more things that I thought was worth mentioning here in the book, The Psyche. One of the things is a little bit about your aura. And we do all have an aura, and there's kind of a radiating aura that you can think of as almost good or evil that comes from people. And there's something called the secret sciences. And these are the people in the world today in various secret societies that understand how the power of the mind works and how the power of our thoughts work. These people, and let me read here, under punishment of death, they were forbidden to reveal their knowledge, their cognitions, and their ability. Humankind has been collected over tremendous periods of time. This unmeasurable knowledge has been collected and hidden in the inaccessible secret sciences, and it will not be revealed until the death of the Pope and the bigwigs of the secret sciences. So what's good about this book, The Psyche, and the book called The Might of Thoughts, that some of the information in the secret sciences can get out to the public. And that's the true power of our thoughts. Because good thinking is neutral positive. And your good thoughts, let me give you an example of a good thought. A wishful dream. And if you have a wishful dream, it can be something as simple as a sunny day with a blue sky and maybe watching your cats play. But it has to be in the present tense. You have to be saying, okay, this is occurring now. This is a wishful dream. This is a neutral positive thought. So if you don't have cats, imagine dogs, or imagine children, whatever works for you. But think of your cats out there playing in the sunshine on a beautiful, pretty warm day. Now that's a neutral positive thought. Has to be in the present tense. You can't think of it about it in the future as something that happens in the future. And you can't say things like, oh, I wish this would happen, or, boy, it would be really nice if this occurs. No, because your subconscious is going to reinterpret that as something that's not going to occur. So when you have a wishful dream, a neutral positive thought, it's in the present tense, it's occurring now, and think about this pleasant circumstance and hold that thought in your mind. Now, right thinking and knowing form a tremendous might that is able to attract and call forth everything that the human being thinks and yearns for. Imagine that power. What the human being thinks radiates beyond his or her own aura, and it influences the environment around them. It influences people, animals, plants. Radiated evil thoughts, on the other hand, worries, hatred, unsatisfaction, and so forth, will have a boomerang effect and be hurled back, in which case they will again inevitably strike the sender of the thoughts. So let's talk about the boomerang effect a little bit, because your thoughts always come back to you. So if you think a good, healthy, neutral, positive thought, it will come back to you as a good, healthy, neutral, positive thought. If you think a worried, anxious thought, it will eventually come back to you as a worried, anxious thought, and it will have a negative impact. However, and this really isn't as complicated as it sounds, but there's something that also occurs where the polarity of a thought can be reversed. So if I think of a good, neutral, positive kind of thought, and let's say you're thinking a very good thing about a person that you respect a lot. When that thought eventually comes back to you in the boomerang effect, it'll still be a good, positive, neutral, positive thought, but it will change its polarity. In other words, everything in the universe tries to balance. So this person that you were thinking about in a good, neutral, positive way, you'll see a slight, you'll see a part of their character that makes them appear a little more vulnerable, per se, than they were when you originally thought about them. So there's a slight change in the polarity. In other words, if you had a neutral, positive thought that was healthy, a good thought that went out, it'll still be a good thought when it comes back, but you'll see a slight variation in it that will make you be more balanced in your point of view. So even good thoughts, when they rebound and they do come back, and good thoughts boomerang back too, will force you to be a little more neutral, positive, and balanced in your own thinking. So that's kind of the idea of the boomerang. Now, if the human being thinks thoughts of hardship as small and unreal, then they become small and unimportant. But the key here is to get your might-oriented thinking, or the neutral, positive, balanced thoughts, to be habitual. If you continually think thoughts on hatred and revenge, you'll eventually become a murderer. You see how your thoughts make you. If your thoughts are concentrated on progress and success and happiness and love, then corresponding success will occur based on the accuracy of your perception. So when your thoughts leave you, they speed out to the unending expanses of the universe, unhindered and unstoppable, in order to bring forth effects and conditions according to how those thoughts are. So depending on the thought, they race away as an invisible but gigantic might of either light or darkness, further charging and strengthening themselves on other thought energies of the same kind. And they rush through the expanses of the universe. Then they search for their way back. So these thoughts go way out into the universe, into the expanses, and then they come back. However, their energy transforms itself on the way back into an opposite. And that's what I'm meaning about the polarity changing. So it's not that it comes back. If it was a good, neutral, positive thought when it went out, it will come back as a good, neutral, positive thought. But its polarity changes a little bit, and it will strike you, and you'll have to think about things in a slightly different point of view when that comes back, and to be more balanced. And again here it says, according to nature, a radiated thought, whether negative or positive, will be hurled back again exactly as it was, but it will be strengthened when it comes back. And this polarity may change when it comes back. Okay. Anyway, these are what the books that Billy writes are like. When you go through these things, you'll get very, very, very deep thoughts will form from these thoughts. So who is Edward Albert Meyer? And you know, as many times as you read the Meyer material and study, and you will, at least in the case of me, I am continually impressed and continually learn more and more about his spirit form, not who the current incarnation necessarily is, but about this very, very ancient spirit form. Now, learning much in this lifetime enables us to gain control of ourselves. And Billy has a saying that says, I always remain relaxed and therefore gain might over myself. And that's one of the keys here with studying the might of thoughts. And there is a section in the book, The Psyche, that's all about the might of thoughts, and that's what I'm reading right now and discussing with you. So good thinking leads to good feelings. Feelings grow from the thoughts. Good thoughts lead to good habits. Good habits lead to good circumstances in your life. You control the circumstances of your life. You control the thoughts of your life. You control your habits. Now, when your thoughts start to run out of control, that's when you need to stop those thoughts. And that's where that wishful dream can come in. Well, like we talked about earlier, some scenario that occurs now in your mind's eye that brings you a neutral, positive, pleasant idea. So you need to start to learn to be able to form consciousness pictures in your mind. Goblet of Truth says, and if you are not prepared with good knowledge in the teaching of the truth, you probably shouldn't be talking about this stuff too much. Because it's very important that we learn as much as we can. Because our thoughts affect not only us, but the people around us, the world around us. Very, very much. So let me step back again a little bit to to the book called Might of Thoughts again. And according to this book, we are a humankind that's ill in its consciousness. We're an insane society that's rushing headlong to our own destruction. And only an evolution of our consciousness can bring about a change in circumstances. And the evolution of the consciousness can only come about through the independent thinking of human beings. But thinking is more stunted on our planet because we live in a consumer society with newspapers and movies. And let me tell you something about the danger of electronic media. And I'm trying more and more to avoid electronic media if possible. It is a very addicting thing, but it destroys your brain, it destroys perception, it destroys your consciousness. Do not read on the computer. Try not to watch too many YouTubes. What happens is, it literally, what I think is happening, the reason we're becoming addicted to cell phones and our computers is because it relieves us from the responsibility of thinking. We kind of drift off when we watch these YouTube videos, when we watch TV, and we don't have to bear the responsibility of, what do I do with my time? What problems do I need to face now and solve? We can go into this little empty nana land where we don't have to think about anything, where we don't have to be responsible. So this is the appeal, and this is what's happening to our society. That's why you see people staring at their cell phones continually, all the time. So, and this is what makes people obtuse, insensitive, slow to understand. And that was one of the prophecies for the third millennium that is talked about in the Goblet of Truth. So, in one of the ways we can fight against becoming obtuse and indifferent and insensitive is by print out the Meyer material. Print it out. Get away from your computer and read it. You can go to the website Future Mankind and print these articles out and read them. Buy some of Billy's books. They're hard to get. Well, it's not quite as convenient as going on Amazon. Now, when you do finally get yourself one of Billy's books, the fluidal energies of your body are going to go into this book. So you really shouldn't have too many other people messing around with this book. In fact, your energies from your spirit form go into the furniture in your house. If you're a musician, it'll go into your musical instrument. It'll go into your clothes. That's the incredible power of our thoughts. You see, our thoughts radiate outward. And they go into the expanse of the universe, and they attract like thinking. So, if we as a society evolve our consciousness, we have independent thinking. That means you don't take my word for things. You develop your own independent thinking like logic. You work and figure things out for yourself. And then we can evolve. It's hard to imagine that we live in a society where independent thinking is rare. But it's true. Now, ask it explained to Billy that the human is still not capable of coping with and fully understanding the truth. And he is not yet mature enough to know his future and approach it correctly. For that reason, the truth must be rewritten prophetically for him as in equations in order to make him think independently, where he slowly finds and recognizes the truth for himself. So, let's look at a few terms here. One is the psyche. The psyche is the part of our material consciousness that controls the thoughts and the feelings of our material consciousness. We also have a spiritual consciousness. We have something called the Gemut, which controls the thoughts and the feelings of our spiritual consciousness. The spirit form impulses the material consciousness, and I believe there are also impulses that come back to the spiritual consciousness. Your spiritual consciousness will never die. Semyase, Billy's third contact, said every person has a human spirit that will not die, that will not sleep. It records everything you do. It records all your impulsations. It will tell you if your thinking is right or wrong. When your thinking is not neutral positive, be sensitive to your own feelings. You'll have a negative feeling. Usually follows a negative thought. That's the way you can tell when your thinking isn't right. A negative feeling usually follows a negative thought. So if you're saying something and you're having a negative feeling, you might want to try to look at it from a slightly different point of view and try to find some flaw in your logic. There could be a flaw in your logic. You know, we live in a time when you're not going to get much support from the outside because most people are out of control in their own thinking. So you're going to have to become better at managing your own thoughts. And your thoughts are much like a garden. Good thoughts lead to more good thoughts. Just like a garden grows, when you take care of the plants that are there, good plants will spread. And you must make the effort to clarify your thoughts, which then become more valuable and purposive and productive. It's like when I'm describing things right now, hopefully things are becoming more clear to me, more clear to you. And this will make things more productive. It will make your life more harmonious and more equalized. And everything needs patience and practice, as well as continual effort, because that's the only way you can open the door to real knowledge is by continual effort. So, work to clarify your thoughts. You might have to say things aloud. Clarify your thoughts. Put an effort into it. Practice it. Be patient. If you do, you'll have a harmonious life. Harmonious life is very enjoyable. When your thoughts become harmonious, you'll start to have inner happiness. I know it comes and goes on this planet, but it's worth working on. To clarify means to make clear, to make it easier to understand, to clear the confusion and the uncertainty. Clarify means to make a clear and intelligent statement, to be free from ambiguity. Confusion is where things start to become blended together. The consciousness is like a garden, and if it is not correctly maintained, there will be wildly growing negative thoughts, which have a confusing and destructive effect. Again, so if you have a thought, look at that thought. How does it make you feel? Are you feeling confused by that thought? Are you feeling unpleasant? Well, if you are, you're probably having a negative thought. You probably want to put an end to that thought. Go into a wish dream state. Go back to being neutral positive. Meditate. Listen to music. Do some exercise. Put yourself in a neutral positive state. You know, people, when they become psychically disturbed, they only see black. They only see negative things because their perceptual ability becomes very limited. They see only things very rigidly through a narrow point of view. Don't allow yourself to fall prey to that limitation. Don't allow your thoughts to be forced into a narrow framework. Broaden your thoughts. You know, many people are shaken and knocked about by the circumstances of their life. It's because they're not controlling your thinking. So that's one of the important aspects of the Meyer information, learning to control their thoughts. It's very, very practical. There's very many advantages to be neutral positive in your thinking. You see, the universal consciousness is neutral positive. It's neither good nor evil. It radiates love. The incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation. Creation loves. It expresses that love through its creatures, and they radiate a splendor. All of nature radiates a splendor. The trees, the birds, the grasses, the plants, the water, the mountains, the lakes, the rivers, they all radiate the love of creation. Love is the highest principle in all creation. And everything follows that principle through absolute logic. Now, absolute logic is absolutely certain. Logic is based on absolute certainty. Let me read something to you here. Okay. A wishful dream must therefore be thought of and envisioned in the absolute present tense, thus, as if the wishful dream was actual and already in the present. We're dealing for absolute logic. Hang in here. The future tense, I will, I would like, it would be nice, it could be nice, etc., applies to an effective wish and therefore may not be used because the subconsciousness interprets that as, let me read here. Subconsciousness would press its once entrenched terrible thing immediately to the foreground again because thoughts like it would, it could, etc. immediately counters with it is not, it cannot, I am suffering. So that's the way your subconscious. So what I'm trying to say is don't think in indecisive terms because the subconsciousness always turns that into a negative. Always think in a positive, absolute sense. Love is logical. It's absolute. Everything follows that in absolute logic. Love is the highest principle in all creation. And everything follows that principle in absolute logic. So do not think in terms of it would, it could, because the subconscious will say immediately, it is not. It cannot. So do not play those kind of games. You have to be logical. Okay, let me continue here. This occurs because the mode of thinking, respectively, the thinking material, I would like, I could, it would be nice, and so forth, is absolutely unlogical. Anytime you start to think and start to act and start to talk in these kind of unsure terms, that is unlogic. Uncertainty, that's fickleness. Logic is not built upon doubtfulness, uncertainty, and fickleness, but on absolute certainty, which is the case. So you say, I do, I make, it is pretty, it is nice, and so forth. Logic is absolute certainty. And logic is built on the certainty of the laws of nature. Well, hopefully that will become clearer and clearer as time goes on, and I hope that's something we spend time on. Because the creation radiates love, so that at every point, the human being can sense the radiating love of creation. That's Empfinden in the German. That's the fine, sensitive feeling of the radiating love of creation. I think, unfortunately, most people on the earth can no longer sense the radiating love of creation. Therefore, they do not sense or have awareness and do not value all life. It's very easy for them to cut down a tree or trees to wipe out a forest. To them, it's nothing, because they no longer have that sensitivity. They no longer observe. They've become obtuse. They've relinquished the responsibility of thinking. They've given it up. See, one of the most important things we need to get back is personal responsibility on the earth. Much of what we have today undermines personal responsibility. And we need to get back to that sense of personal responsibility. Bushes, trees, plants, animals, lakes, rivers, everything that crawls and flies on the earth has a spirit form. So we all live many, many lives. If you look into the forest, you can see the swinging waves in action that connect all the animals and all the plants. That's why the birds move in a flock. And they turn on a dime. Because we're all connected. All of nature is an indissoluble web of life. And if you think of something that's woven, there's a weave where things are interlocking. And that's the way nature is. It's an interlocking web of life. And nature functions on absolute certainty. And we have to think in absolutely certain terms. We cannot undermine our own thinking through I coulds or I may or I would. No, it has to be I will. I will do such and such. I will do a certain thing. That's how you take control of your life. The power of our thoughts is incredible. We need to nurture neutral, positive thoughts. Nurture means to feed and protect. Nurture can also mean to support and encourage, as during a period of training. Thus, at birth, there are already thoughts going on in the womb. So, when your spirit form comes in, your consciousness comes in. So, the fetus is already having thoughts at a very, very young age. So your thoughts start out at the very, very earliest points of your life, affecting who and what you are. As a matter of fact, the thoughts and profound learning and the forming of the personality, as well as even the forming of morality, are developing in the womb of the human being. The human being attracts what he or she is. So again, you form your own destiny. And you can actually think of your inner self as almost like a god. Your inner self forms your thoughts. And that's where the might is created. Therefore, the human being himself creates, through the might of his or her thoughts, every one of her states, regardless of the actual inner freedom or the negative state of inner imprisonment. So, if you think a thought, you should steer that thought. If you steer that thought will go towards inner freedom and good circumstances. So when you have wishes, and I was talking about wish dreams earlier, these are not prayers to a god or a saint. Rather, they are thoughts that are generated by oneself and are fed back out of the consciousness into the inner self. So your thoughts and your wish dreams go out of your consciousness and back to your inner self, where they're strengthened. You create a fulfillment. So the wishes and the prayers are not really focused on some God out there somewhere. They are thoughts generated by your consciousness and fed back to the inner self, where they can create fulfillment. Now, this is one of the original prayers created by Henoch, one of the incarnations of Nokudamian, the Meyer spirit form. My spirit, you are almighty. Your name shall be honored. Your realm shall open, incarnate within me. Your might, the might of your consciousness, shall unfold within me, on earths and in universes. Give me my daily bread, love and wisdom, today, so I recognize my responsibility, and I recognize the truth, and do not throw me into confusion and delusion, but release me from my own misunderstanding. For the realm within me, the power of knowledge and the knowledge within me are yours in eternity. So the prayer is not directed to the spirit form, but to the human being's material consciousness block, because that's where all the work concerning the consciousness evolution of the human being takes place. So again, wishes and prayers are not to a god or a saint, but they are thoughts generated out of the consciousness and fed back to the inner self. Out of the consciousness and fed back to the inner self. One of the prayers of Nokudamian, my spirit, you are all-knowing, all-capable, all-wise, all-truthful, and all-loving in me. Your name shall be honored. So there's a kind of thinking which rotates in a positive way, in a very, very helpful way. And that's neutral positive thinking. That's these prayers, these wishful dreams can rotate in a neutral positive way to strengthen the material consciousness. So that is the good and positive rotation. Now, negative thoughts sometimes spring up out of the unconsciousness. They will rotate in a negative way, and they can cause addiction. And addiction is a chronic brain disease that causes compulsive substance use, or compulsively wrong thoughts, or compulsively wrong behaviors. Side effects are anger and depression and all sorts of afflictions. So don't fall prey to those addicting, rotating negative thoughts, but instead feed the thoughts out of the consciousness. Now remember, wishes and prayers, they're generated by oneself, and they're fed back out of the consciousness into the inner self to create fulfillment. And that's where the wishful thoughts and such come in. I want to thank everyone that's listened to the show. Thank all of the listeners to the archives. I appreciate everyone's listening to the show. Thanks for downloading these archives and listening. It's important to our future here on the earth. I hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Good day.